Don't talk. All right, everybody. I think we're back now. Sorry about that. Let's go ahead and get started here. Able to delete this video real quick. All right, I greatly apologize for that, everybody. Apparently, Restream didn't authenticate, which is why I was unable to update my docs and why stuff on my stream wasn't working anyways. So we're going to go ahead and fix this too, because I apparently am not doing well today. Welcome, everybody, to the Crowdsourced Politics Weekly News Roundup. We do this every Thursday, starting at roughly 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, going to roughly 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, covering the news that was with a kind of analysis only the crowd can provide. This week, we are going to be covering everything related to the Trump indictment, as well as some SCOTUS news and other news bites. But first up is going to be SCOTUS. So let's go ahead and get into our SCOTUS POTUS. First up is going to be POTUS. So we're going to start the stream here officially with the video here, and then we'll get into it. Welcome, everybody. This is Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup. I'm your host and moderator, Cypher, and we're going to cover a lot of news today. Our usual updates on the Russia's war in Ukraine have been preempted due to the Trump indictment, so that we can bring you that breaking news today. And of course, we got to come up with Trump indictment news here. Look at that. On the front page of the New York Times. I can't get this thing to go away. So, obviously, Trump has been indicted in the New York case for his payment to Stormy Daniels to keep her quiet about their illicit affair. So we're going to talk about it. So just yesterday, former president had words of praise for the grand jury. So those praise were as follows. I have gained such respect for this grand jury, and perhaps even the grand jury system as a whole. The evidence is so overwhelming in my favor and so ridiculously bad for the highly partisan and hateful district attorney that the grand jury is saying, hold on, we are not a rubber stamp, which most grand juries are branded as being. We are not going to vote against a preponderance of evidence or against a large number of legal scholars, all saying there is no case here. Drop this sick witch hunt now. And of course, what happened? Well, he was indicted. News broke at 5:33 p.m. Eastern Standard Time that Manhattan grand jury voted to indict Donald Trump for his role in paying hush money to porn star, according to 5 people with knowledge of the matter. And then here is Alvin Bragg's statement as well. Pulling up here. So this is what we got. Pull this up. There we go. This evening, we contacted Mr. Trump's attorney to coordinate his surrender to the Manhattan DA's office for arraignment on a Supreme Court indictment, which remains under seal. Guidance will be provided when the arraignment date is selected. That is his statement. The former president's attorney, Joe Tacopina, confirmed to the Dallas Morning News that he has been informed that the former president was in fact indicted. This is a historic development that will shake up the 2024 presidential race and forever mark him as the nation's first former president to face criminal charges. The details of the indictment are expected to be officially announced in the coming days. And we actually have some of that, which we'll get to in a little bit. While recent news has focused on the payment to Daniels, it's possible that the charges also include similar payments Trump made to Karen McDowell. Karen McDowell. By then, prosecutors working for the district attorney, Alvin Bragg, will have asked the former president to surrender. Trump will then face in-person arraignment. Trump has for decades avoided criminal charges despite persistent scrutiny and repeated investigations, creating an aura of legal invulnerability that the vote to indict punctures. His actions surrounding his 2020 electoral defeat are now the focus of a separate federal investigation, and a Georgia prosecutor is in the final stages of an investigation into Trump's attempts to reverse the election results in that state. Unlike the investigations that arose from his time in the White House, this case is built around a tawdry episode that predates his presidency. The reality star turned presidential campaign candidate who shocked the political establishment by winning the White House now faces a reckoning for hush money payment that buried a sex scandal in the final days of the 2016 campaign. Today, the three lead prosecutors of Trump's investigation walked into a building where the grand jury was sitting in the minutes before the panel was scheduled to meet at 2 p.m. One of them carried a copy of the penal law, with post-it notes visible, which was likely used to read the criminal statutes to the grand jury before they voted. About 3 hours later, the prosecutors walked into the court clerk's office through a back door to begin the process of filing the indictment. Trump has consistently denied all wrongdoing and attacked Bragg, a Democrat, accusing him of leading a politically motivated prosecution. He has also denied any affair with, I can never get this set up correctly. All right. So Trump has consistently denied all wrongdoing and attacked Bragg, a Democrat, accusing him of leading a politically motivated prosecution. He has also denied any affair with the porn star, Stormy Daniels, who had been looking to sell her story of a tryst with Trump during the campaign. Here's what else you need to know. Bragg and his lawyers will likely attempt to negotiate Mr. Trump's surrender, which has been talked about at length on the news in the last couple of hours. If he agrees, it will raise the prospect of a former president with Secret Service in tow being photographed and fingerprinted in the bowels of the New York State courthouse. The prosecution's star witness is Michael Cohen, Trump's former fixer, who paid $130,000 to keep Miss Daniels quiet. Cohen has said that Trump directed him to buy Miss Daniels' silence, and then Trump and his family business, the Trump Organization, helped cover the whole thing up. It should be further noted here that the grand jury indictments, which we'll get to, I haven't had a chance to read them because they dropped right when we hit start the stream, likely include the fact that Trump used campaign money to pay Mr. Cohen back. So the company's internal records falsely identified the reimbursement as a legal expense, which helped conceal the purpose of the payments. Although the specific charges remain unknown, which we will get to in a moment, Mr. Bragg's prosecution has zeroed in on the hush money payment and the false records created by the Trump Organization. A conviction is not a sure thing, though. An attempt to combine a charge relating to false records with an election violation relating to the payment of Daniels would be based on a legal theory that has yet to be evaluated by judges. This raises the possibility that a court could throw out or limit the charges as well. The vote to indict, the product of a nearly 5-year investigation, kicks off a new and volatile phase in Trump's post-presidential life as he makes a third run for the White House. And it could throw the race for the Republican nomination, which he leads in the most polls, into uncharted territory. Furthermore, Bragg is the first prosecutor to lead an indictment of Mr. Trump. He is now likely to become a national figure, enduring a harsh political spotlight, especially as Trump calls him corrupt and feckless. The vote by the Manhattan grand jury to indict former President Donald J. Trump raises novel legal and political questions because he is running for the Republican nomination for president again. Any indictment or conviction would not bar Mr. Trump from running or campaigning. A clean criminal record is not among the criteria in the Constitution for who is and is not eligible to be president. Furthermore, officials who have been impeached and convicted of high crimes and misdemeanors may be barred from future office, but the Senate acquitted Trump at both of his impeachment trials. Still, it would be an extraordinary for a person who is under indictment, let alone conviction of a felony, to be a major party nominee. There are only a few such examples of somewhat serious candidates who even come close. They include the unsuccessful run in the 2016 Republican primary by Rick Perry, the former governor of Texas, after he was indicted of charges of abuse of power. The charges were dismissed months after he dropped out of the race. There was also the 1920 run by Eugene V. Debs as the Socialist Party nominee, while he sat in prison for an Espionage Act conviction. If Trump were to be elected president while a felony case against him was pending or after any conviction, many complications would ensue. The Justice Department has taken the position since the Nixon administration that even indicting a president while in office would be unconstitutional because it would interfere with the president's abilities to perform duties as head of the executive branch. There is no definitive Supreme Court ruling because the issue has never arisen before as well. Notably, in 1997, the Supreme Court allowed a federal lawsuit against then-President Bill Clinton to proceed while he was still in office. That was a civil case, though, not a criminal one, and it was in the federal system, not the state courts, as the indictment in Manhattan would be. In that opinion, Justice John Paul Stevens wrote in passing that a similar case brought in state court system might arise. Quote, "Federalism and community concerns, as well as the interest in protecting federal officials from possible local prejudice," but he did not say whether those factors could or would change the outcome. Even more extraordinary complications would arise were Trump to be convicted and incarcerated, and yet elected anyways. One possibility is that he could win a federal court order requiring his release from state prisons as a result of a constitutional challenge. Another is that upon the commencement of his second term, he would be immediately removed from office under the 25th Amendment as, quote, unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office. Excuse me. All right, just getting this prepped a little bit. Oh, come on. Sorry, just breaking news is happening, and so it's being distracting me. Let's continue on, though. The Rolling Stone said in late reporting today that some observers have argued that the criminal case against Trump lacks gravitas, and that the salacious nature of the Stormy Daniels scandal makes it a poor test case for the serious and unprecedented business of seeking a criminal conviction of a former president. Trump and his allies have derided the prosecution as corrupt and partisan, pointing to Bragg having won office thanks in part to financial support provided by the liberal financier George Soros. And while Soros did contribute money to the Color of Change Pact, which later endorsed Bragg, he did not expressly contribute to the Bragg campaign. The Huffington Post reported that the indictment in New York City gives Trump, who frequently claimed that his actions as president were historic, another claim to history. Quote, "He became the first of the 44 ex-chief executives to be charged with a crime. He had previously entered the history books by becoming the only president to be impeached twice." End quote. There's obviously a concern that this announcement will result in pockets of violence in parts of the country as well. However, Trump's rally in Waco, Texas this weekend drew a crowd of less than 3,000 in a venue with a capacity for a capacity of 50,000. And the response to Trump's call for protest when he himself announced his pending arrest resulted in only a handful of peaceful protests in New York, West Palm Beach, and California. Let's see. Donald Trump faces. Now, as far as those indictments are concerned, let me give a quick Google search for this because I don't know if they dropped or if this is just a report from CNN. So do this. Okay. So we'll just pull up the Reuters headline here really quick. So there isn't much known in the way of those indictments, but according to Reuters, former U.S. President Trump faces more than 30 counts related to business fraud in an indictment by excuse me, sorry, I ate right before coming on here. Let's rewind that and start over. No, I will not provide feedback. All right. So, according to Reuters and CNN, former U.S. President Donald Trump faces more than 30 counts related to business fraud in an indictment by Manhattan grand jury investigating hush money payment to a porn star, CNN reported on Thursday, citing sources and without providing further details. In other words, this is likely what is happening, but there's no one wanted to speak of it on the record. So there is that. All right. Let's get over to it. All right. Oh, you zoomed into. Oh, come on. I hate sometimes when you have to scroll in stuff. I want it bigger. Bigger. Fine. All right. Let's continue on, though. So let us now bring up what Trump said about the indictment here. All right. So I'm going to look over this way because it's a little bigger on the screen. Can I get it bigger? Come on. Come on. All right, whatever. This. We're going to do this really quick. I bet I can get it bigger on Paint. There we go. There we go. All right. So, statement by Donald Trump, 45th President of the United States. This is a political prosecution and election interference at the highest level in history. From the time I came down the golden escalator at Trump Tower, and even before I was sworn as your president of the United States, the radical left Democrats, the enemy of the hard-working men and women of this country, have been engaged in a witch hunt to destroy the Making America Great Again movement. You remember it just like I do. Russia, Russia, Russia. The Mueller hoax. Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine. Impeachment 1 hoax. Impeachment hoax 2. The legal and unconstitutional Mar-a-Lago raid. And now this. The Democrats have lied, cheated, and stolen in their obsession with trying to get Trump. But now they've done the unthinkable, indicting a completely innocent person in an act of blatant election interference. Never before in our nation's history has this been done. The Democrats have cheated countless times over the decades, including spying on my campaign, but weaponizing our justice system to punish a political opponent who just so happens to be a president of the United States and by far the leading Republican candidate or president has never happened before. Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg, who was handpicked and funded by George Soros, as we just said was not entirely true, is a disgrace. Rather than stopping the unprecedented crime wave taking over New York City, a common Republican talking point, he's doing Joe Biden's dirty work, ignoring the murderers and burglaries and assaults he should be focused on. This is how Bragg spends his time. I believe this witch hunt will backfire immensely, massively on Joe Biden. The American people realize exactly what the radical left Democrat are doing here. Everyone can see it. So our movement and our party, united and strong, will first defeat Alvin Bragg. Then we will defeat Joe Biden. And we will going to throw every one of those crooked Democrats out of office so we can make America great again. End quote. By the Trumpier. The Trumpier. There there's still more. Now we got some reactions to the Trump indictment to go over as well from Republicans far and wide. First up, we have Ron DeSantis stating, quote, "Oh, look, wait a second. Does he pay for Twitter?" Legacy verified, okay. At least he doesn't pay for Twitter. Anyways, the weaponization of the legal system to advance a political agenda turns the rule of law on its head. You would know. It is un-American. The Soros-backed Manhattan District Attorney has consistently bent the law to downgrade felonies and excuse criminal misconduct. Yet now, he is stretching the law to target a political opponent. Florida will not assist in the extradition request given the questionable circumstances at issue with the Soros-backed Manhattan prosecutor and his political agenda. What I believe this means is that Ron DeSantis is in fact less likely to run than to run. I give it a under 50% chance that he actually jumps into the race for 2024. I have been saying that for a bit now. My certainty of him running has diminished over time. And the reason I say that is because the longer it goes out, the less likely it is that he can jump in without alienating Trump and therefore the Trump base. DeSantis saying that Florida will not assist in an extradition request, even though it's not going to happen. Trump's lawyers have already said that he will go willingly and have said that for the last week. Means that he is still trying to thread that needle and make good with Trump's backers. And that will make it incredibly hard for him to take Trump on in a primary. So, what does this mean to me? Well, if Trump is not fully criminally indicted and found guilty in this case, or in the Georgia case, or the Georgia case takes too long for him to actually, for it to matter, DeSantis does not jump in, and instead will jump in 2028. And I am pretty confident about that as well. But we have more to cover. So let's go on to the next one here. And here we go. This is going to be fun. Of Don Jr. Donnie boy, Don Jr.
I'm going to go make some phone calls. I'm going to look into this further.
I don't know if he's actually crying or if these are fake tears, but they might be real. I mean, if Trump goes down, likely a lot of his family members are going down for the same thing, since it is a family business and all of the family is involved. But let's go ahead and restart that just so that we get a clear hearing of just what Don Jr. is going to say. I'm going to go make some phone calls. I'm going to look into this further. I'm going to see what exactly it means and, talk to the team. Maybe we'll have to do a special over the weekend. I just, I don't have much more to say other than the insanity of what it is. The weak-kneed response from so many Republicans, especially those that, have done a really good job of paying influencers to make them seem really MAGA. Hey, I get it. Unfortunately, that's the game, and that's what it is for them. They don't really care about these things. They care about... Oh, that's good. He you know what? He's not wrong. He's not wrong. Paying influencers to seem MAGA, which I don't know if that's what's going on, but everybody is playing to the MAGA base here in the Republican sphere here for the most part. Even people running against Trump are like, well, I differ from Trump on some things, but we agree more than we differ. I just think that we need somebody new. That came out from Nikki Haley's team. That's come out for a lot of people because Trump, as much as Republicans love him, as much as his good old Don Jr. loves him, as much as the base loves Trump, Trump is what we call in the industry a massive toxic piece of shit asset. He is. He's just tainted. That's why he lost in 2020. He lost because of how he handled COVID and because of all the stuff swirling around him during these indictments and all this story of corruption and the nepotism. Looking at you, buddy. People don't like that. Swing voters don't like that. Swing voters also don't like the seemingly prosecutorial dip stuff that's going on somewhat. So it might help him in a little bit if he's seen as a martyr. But if we're all honest with ourselves, and I think that we should be, this hurts him. A successful indictment in front of a grand jury, even though a grand jury has been said, a prosecutor could indict a ham sandwich for murder at a grand jury hearing, does give this due process weight and shows that there is more smoke there. And when there's smoke, there's fire. So that is what's going on here. And again, the New York case isn't the strongest case. There's a lot more happening, especially in Georgia, which we will report on once those indictments, if they come out, we'll report them. But there's been a lot of stuff going on. Let's let them continue though.
About what their donors ultimately tell them, because that's where they get their money that allows them to continue and perpetuate their careers.
I mean, that's where you get your money from daddy, and duping people out of millions of dollars. They didn't the Trump team didn't fund their own campaign. They funded their own campaign with a loan that they paid back with donor money. But anyways.
Why they hate Trump, because Trump doesn't really need them. It's why they've pulled.
No, that's a lie.
All the stops to go after Trump for 6 years. I know a little bit about it myself because they did the same to me. And it's never going to end, folks, until...
Well, okay, so they did do it to him. Do it. Where's my... Oh, over here. All right, do it to him. Move my hands in the camera. Because the Mueller investigation looked at Trump Jr. For talking to Russians and oligarchs or what have you, and determined that he was too stupid to break the law. I don't think that should have been defense, but it was. So
we say enough is enough. Again, until we become unafraid to speak out. They have spent probably trillions putting you in your place.
Okay. Sure, buddy. Trillions of... Yeah, okay. Okay. We got another tweet from Tom Tillis. Here on the reaction. Senator Tillis, first GOP senator with a reaction. The indictment doesn't pass the smell test. The Department of Justice already looked into the facts and decided there was no case to be made against Trump. That's not true. That's not true. So the indictment doesn't pass the smell test. Justice Department looked into the facts and decided there was no case to be made against Trump. This is the same district attorney who is notorious for letting violent criminals off the hook. Blah, 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 blah. But then been laser focused on pursuing a politicized prosecution of a former president. Politics should never tip the scales of justice, and Congress has every right to investigate. And Congress has every right to investigate the conduct and decision-making of the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. No. We have a federal system. Oh, well, no, they can investigate. Let them investigate. Let all the sun shine in. We're gonna let the sun shine in. But yeah, so that's that. Oh, look, Eric Trump saying this is a third world prosecutorial misconduct. It is an opportunistic targeting of a political opponent in a campaign year. Honestly, this might be the only reason Trump ran again, is to make all these defenses. Like, given how much of lockstep that they are. We got Ted Cruz saying the Democratic Party hatred for Trump knows no bounds. The substance of this political prosecution is utter garbage. There is completely unprecedented and its catastrophic escalation in the weaponization of the justice system. The justice system is not being weaponized, my guy. The justice system is working as intended. You just don't like it because it's going after a person that represents your party, and that taints your entire party. If this was going after Hillary Clinton, which the Justice Department also looked into, you would be praising the Justice Department, the New York Attorney's General Office, the DA's office, Attorney General's office, of saying how great you are that they are doing a service to the American people and protecting the rule of law and ensuring that nobody is above the law. Be real. Just be real. I just want ultimately what I would love to see in all of this It's just for some admittance that there is smoke there, it should be investigated, and that we should let the justice system do its thing. But they don't want to do that because it makes them look bad. But we got to continue on. Next up, we have Kevin McCarthy saying Alvin Bragg has irreparably damaged our country in an attempt to interfere in our presidential election. Okay, first of all, this is the way it should be looked at. A presidential primary is not interfering with the presidential election. Full stop. Primaries should be seen as private clubs going through a process to choose a representative of that party to the American people for a particular political office. That's what it should be seen as. It should not be seen as a part of the greater political process of democracy, because it's not. It is nothing more than a private club choosing a representative to represent them. Not you, not me. That's what the general election is for. So, stop with that nonsense. Continuing on, McCarthy said that, quote, as he routinely frees violent criminals to terrorize the public, he weaponized our sacred justice system against Donald Trump. So, go after criminals, don't go after a criminal. That's what I'm hearing here. They want a two-tier justice system? Is that what you want, McCarthy? You want a two-tier justice system? You want the rich and powerful to not be held accountable, but you want, violent criminals to see the full justice of the law? Come on. And I put violent criminals in quotes because I don't know. So I'm saying that there might be some people that are violent. There might be some people who weren't violent that were not prosecuted by this DA for various reasons. Honestly, if they really want all violent criminals to be prosecuted, they should spend more money on hiring more lawyers and judges to ensure that every single criminal is prosecuted, rather than going through this bullshit system of plea deals in order to make the system somewhat function. Just think about that. Continuing on, the American people will not tolerate this injustice. Oh, I think we will. And the House of Representatives will hold Alvin Bragg and his unprecedented abuse of power to account. I'm sure you'll try. So here's Elisa Stefanik. This lady. My full statement on Trump, released on letterhead for some reason. Today's House Republican Conference Chair, Elisa Stefanik, released the following statement. The unprecedented election interference, again, shouldn't be considered election interference because primaries are not about the general public picking their representative. It is about a private party picking their representative for a particular office in order for the general public and the actual election to pick who serves them. In fact, really, the government should be the only thing that the government really, in my opinion, should be involved in. And maybe this is just my old libertarianness speaking, or maybe they just had a good point. Really, the government should just fund the government should just fund the general election and let the primary just be funded fully by the parties themselves, and the parties, however they want to decide how they pick their representative for that ticket, just go about doing it in the way they see fit. Continuing on, though. From corrupt socialist district attorney Alvin Bragg. These people don't know what socialism means. This guy is a quintessential liberal. I doubt that there's a socialist bone in his body. So, again, more nonsense. As usual. It's a political witch hunt and a dark day for America. No, not really a dark day. It's a dark day if if somebody decides to try to kill people over it, then it becomes a dark day of America. But, rhetoric, whatever. The radical far left will stop at nothing to prosecute Joe Biden's chief political opponent ahead of 2024 presidential election to suppress the will and voice of the American people. If this is the best you have to offer the American people, is a washed up, has-been, former reality TV star who convinced millions of people that he knew what the fuck he was doing when it came to running a business, despite the fact that thousands of his businesses have failed and he had always been bailed out by his daddy's money, and the fact that he had connections within New York's in order to get land to build buildings during a time when real estate value was going through the roof, and yet somehow still managed to go bankrupt several times. You have to reassess your priorities. And everything I just said about Trump is provable. Everything. This man has said so himself, and it is evident in his tax filings and the trust that his daddy left him. A small loan of $300 million can easily turn into billions of dollars just by sitting on it on the stock market. So I don't want to hear it. What is it? 8% a year for 20 years? Yeah. Continuing on. Tens of millions of patriotic Americans have never been so energized to exercise their constitutional right to peacefully organize and vote at the ballot box to save our great republic by electing President Donald J. Trump in 2024. Given his rally in Waco, I don't know about that, bro. I don't know. But wait, there's more. Now we got MTG Mayor Marjorie Taylor Greene saying impeach Biden. He'll give us every reason. And the family banking records and more are giving us receipts. He's given us every reason. What family banking records? You mean the bullshit on the laptop? Okay. But now the gloves are off, apparently. Prosecute any and all crimes. Enough of this witch hunt bullshit. Well, if we're prosecuting any and all crimes, then I hate to break it to you, Marjorie, Trump has committed crimes. From the looks of it. Between paying off a porn star to hush money, lying about where that money came from, instructing Michael Cohen to do such, the Georgia election phone calls with saying, wink, wink, hey, just find me 24,000 votes. One more than Joe Biden got. So we can call this thing a good deal. Twice, possibly. How about lying on taxes? How about the fraud that's coming from New York? Like the Trump organization was found guilty of inflating their asset values in order to get loans. They paid off assessors to say that their properties were worth more money than they are, and then used that to get bigger loans from banks at more favorable interest rates. You don't have a problem with that? You don't think fraud is a crime? Okay. Okay, Marjorie, that's cool. And now, Donald Trump himself. Yes. Himself saying, quote, "These thugs and radical left monsters." I can't do his voice. I cannot do his voice. All right. These thugs and radical left monsters have just indicted the 45th president of the United States of America and the leading Republican candidate. That doesn't fucking matter. By far for the 2024 nomination for president. Activate caps mode. This is an attack on our country, the likes of which has never been seen before. It is likewise a continuing attack on our own once free and fair elections. The USA is now a third world nation, a nation in serious decline. So sad. But the serious decline narrative has been pushed for months, years, some say, about the fact that the US is no longer going to be reserve currency of the world, that the stock market's crashing, prices are out of control. All these things is all for a person, for a group of people that really love America, yay, yay, America, USA, USA, they really sure like shitting on it when their boy isn't in power anymore. Isn't that curious? I think it's curious. I think it's curious. Oh, but wait, we got Fox News now. We have Jesse Waters talking about it. So is that Michael? Is that Trey Gowdy? That's Trey Gowdy. Look at it. There we go. Oh, wrong one. Come on, click on the right thing. Oh, that's why. Where's my camera? Let me get my camera out of the way. Look at that. It's Trey Gowdy. All right. Anyways, that's who's talking. We'll put my thing up here and hit the play.
Trey, did Democrats just indict a former president over sex? Because we were told during the 90s that it was just sex, and it was just a private deal, and it had nothing to do with politics and nothing to do with politics.
Okay.
Weren't we told that? And you have to understand, he says he didn't have sex with this woman. She had her hand out, saying, hey, I'm not going to say anything unless you pay me. So either it's a consensual sexual encounter or it's a shakedown. And Democrats want to make that a felony?
Okay. Okay, Jesse. All right, Mr. Waters. Let's talk about this a little bit. All right, because this is the going narrative on this thing right now. Like with Clinton, the sex isn't the crime. The crime is lying about it and potentially, from the looks of it, more than likely committing financial fraud to cover it up. With Clinton, it was lying about it. It was committing perjury under oath, lying under oath, committing perjury to the FBI about having sex with Monica Lewinsky. With the Trump stuff, it is lying about it, covering it up, and committing fraud to keep Daniels quiet. The fraud comes from the fact that he's paying off a person to remain quiet. Catch and kill, right? That sort of thing. The fraud comes with misrepresenting the fees he paid to his lawyer, Michael Cohen. Say what you want about Michael Cohen, about him being a conniving piece of crap. I mean, he is Trump's lawyer, or was Trump's lawyer. That goes with the territory. Okay? But if he put those down on like multiple checks saying legal fees, and those multiple checks that came on over 6 months said legal fees, and they added up to $130,000, that's fraud. It is campaign fraud, campaign contribution fraud, if the money came from the Trump campaign for presidency, which we have no evidence, we have no reason to disbelieve that it did not. Or, I'm sorry, we have no reason to not believe that it did. So, that's where this is. Let's go back over to the video and let him finish.
Well, keep in mind, it can't be sex because Alvin Bragg, among the many crimes he said he was no longer going to prosecute, prostitution was on that list. So,
okay, sure, buddy. Wait, what? Hold on, this is... All right, I don't know who is this Leggett, CEO and co-founder of Pillow Fight Co. Deal Fellow, featured in CNN, Fox News, New York Times, WOPO, and more. Instagram, okay. A Thiel Fellow. All right. Pillow Fight Club, most talked about consumer brand of 2021. PR Week, good pillow. Okay. This might have some legs. Trump's source just sent me the talking points he just sent to his inner circle. Must make points. This is a witch hunt. President Trump is completely innocent. Check. This is election interference. Radical left Democrats in New York District Attorney's Office are politicizing our justice system to influence the 2024 presidential election. Well, that's been said. This is unprecedented. Never before. Yep, that's good too. That's also in there. Witch hunt. This prosecution. It's a persecution. Yeah, that was in there since before President Trump sworn. And radical left Democrats have attacked him for Russia, Ukraine, blah, blah, blah. That's what Trump just put out. Continuing. New York's District Attorney's Office chose their target first and have been hunting for a crime ever since. That has also been revealed to be a talking point. That's also revealed to be false. They've been investigating this for 5 years since it became public to see if there was any crime there. That's how you investigate crime. The only reason we are just now getting an indictment is because Trump's legal team fought New York in court over years to try to quash the investigation by saying that the New York Attorney General's office had no legal authority to investigate a sitting president. New York disagreed. It went on to investigate. But yeah. What else we got? So that's bullshit, and also that's been the talking point. So that's already been checked off the list too. These actions constitute prosecutorial misconduct and are un-American. Check that one off the list. Election interference. Radical left Democrat New York Alvin Bragg is leading blatant unconstitutional attempt to interfere with a federal election by attempting to prosecute Trump. Also check. That is gone off on the list as well. So these talking points have all been made, including the final one, which is that Bragg has received $1 million from George Soros. So yeah. Well, we know where this is going. Prepare to hear all this over and over and over again for the next forever. Honestly, this is never going away. Even if Trump sits behind bars, there will still be people clinging to this nonsense. This nonsense. And then finally, we have this statement from Michael Cohen on the Manhattan indictment of Trump. So, for the first time in our country's history, a president, current or former, of the United States has been indicted. I take no pride in issuing this statement and wish to also remind everyone of the presumption of innocence, as provided by the Due Process Clause. However, I do take solace in validating the alleged that no one is above the law, not even former presidents. Today's indictment is not the end of this chapter, but rather just the beginning. Now that this charge has been filed, it is better for the case to let the indictment speak for itself. The two things I wish to say at this time is that accountability matters, and I stand by my testimony and the evidence I have provided to District Attorney of New York, Michael Cohen. End. So yeah, that is everything that we have so far about the indictment to Trump. So to recap, the talking points are basically radical left Democrats, corruption. This is not actually illegal. They're doing everything to try to stop me. They don't want President Trump to be president again. Blah, 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 blah. All the things they've been saying for the last year since he got out of office and was impeached and all that stuff. Same talking points. They didn't work in 2020. Let's hope they don't work in 2024, because while the New York case is the weakest case that Trump is facing, with 30 indictments, maybe it's not as weak as everybody is seeming that it is. That's one. Two, Ron DeSantis came out and said that he would not help with extradition. Trump has claimed that he'll be turning himself in, so it's a hollow claim. However, as time goes on, and as DeSantis more and more defends Trump, it makes it less and less likely that he will enter the race against him. Because if DeSantis enters the race against Trump, his political career is more than likely over. So I am putting him entering the race at under a 50% chance. That can change if Trump is indicted is found guilty, or in the New York case, or indicted in the Georgia case, and that indictment has legs. I believe it has legs. So there's still that under 50% chance assumes that the Georgia case is going to take a bit longer to go through the motions. But as more time goes on, as more defenses of Trump come out, it becomes riskier and riskier for anybody else to jump in the race against him. And most people don't like running against an incumbent president, and it tends to hurt their chances for the future. Saw that with Mitt Romney, for example. So that's where we are. Those are the two big things, the two big takeaways of this case. But with that, that concludes our segment about the Trump indictment. So let us now move on to some other news, but let me make sure I didn't miss anything. So I am sorry, everybody. I did not see your your comments here. So hey, Mind of Z, glad you joined us. Appreciate you tapping in. Breaking from Forbes. Okay. So this is Nikki. Nikki, thank you. So breaking from Forbes, Trump, who was at Mar-a-Lago when the indictment was announced, is expected to turn himself in for arraignment on Tuesday. His attorney, Susan, Nichols, told the New York Times. So yeah, he's turning himself in on Tuesday. Thank you for that. No, thank you. I'm not interested in promotion. Anytime. Becca Fitchter. Did I pronounce that right? Fitchner? Any ideas on the timeline for Georgia? It looks like that won't happen until May. There's currently a suit pending that has to be resolved from Trump before they can continue on in that case. So wouldn't expect that until till May or so on that one. Hopefully I got all your guys' questions in and you're still with us, hopefully. Sorry about that. I was, reading and doing all that stuff, so I got to the comments a bit later because my system is not working properly as it wants to do. So yeah. But let us now continue on with the news roundup. And now we're going to move on to US politics, especially with the House of Representatives. Let's talk about what is going on here. So based on reporting from UPI, House lawmakers this week unanimously voted to strip China of its developing nation status. Okay. The status has afforded Beijing preferential treatment in its international agreements and treaties with the United States. H.R. 1107, better known as the PRC is Not a Developing Country Act, passed the House in a vote of 415 to 0, with 19 lawmakers abstaining on Monday. It's a weird abstention. All right, we'll talk about that a little bit. So the PRC are the initials for China's official name, the People's Republic of China. The legislation, sponsored by Representative Young Kim, Republican from California, and Gary Conley, a Virginia Democrat, was introduced in late February as relations worsened between Washington and Beijing. The bill was introduced based on accusations that China, the world's second largest economy, was benefiting from its developing nation status by receiving loans and developmental assistance from international organizations, even as they exploited other countries through its Belt and Road Initiative that critics have described as a debt trap. Now, the reason it's described as a debt trap is because a lot of the development that China has helped these countries with comes in the form of loans and material loans in order to develop the Belt and Road Initiative, connecting China to the greater world through trains, highways, shipping yards, etc., all designed to allow China to export more of its goods to more places and create better friendships with those nations. Now, while it is a classic debt trap, China has been playing more of a long game with it and has not called in their loans in the same way that the United States might have, or France, or other countries. We have to give a clear account of this. So China has forgiven some loans, has reduced the terms of other loans, reduced the amount of money owed. Had some people at times where they're like, okay, we won't call your loans in, but you have to allow more of our people to work on this project and less of your people to work on this project, things like that. So they're definitely using the Belt and Road Initiative and other infrastructure projects, especially through the Middle East and Africa, in order to increase their soft power and build friendship ties with those nations. So they're not going around and just being like, give me all that land because you can't pay your debt. But there's some stuff going on where it's a bit more give and take and a little bit more positive for the countries being involved. This isn't to say that it's good. It's just not the same kind of debt trap that people are used to. And There's not always the military bases being built as a result of not being able to pay the debt. They've started doing that, so they might do that more in the future, especially since Xi Jinping has cemented power fully in China. But we have no evidence, direct evidence of that happening as of right now to the scale that is super concerning for that particularly. The things they're doing should be a concern to Americans, especially if they want to have more friendly relations with more nations from country to country perspective, but not necessarily, have to worry about China building military bases all over the world, similar to what the United States has done. Hopefully that makes sense to y'all. All right. So continuing on though, for some quick background on China's Belt and Road Initiatives, or BRI, we turn to a February report from the Council of Foreign Relations. BRI is sometimes referred to as the New Silk Road and is one of the most ambitious infrastructure projects ever conceived. Launched in 2013 by President Xi Jinping, the vast collection of development and investment initiatives was originally devised to link East Asia and Europe through physical infrastructure. In the decades since, the project has expanded to Africa, Oceania, and Latin America, significantly broadening China's economic and political influence. Xi's plan was two-pronged: the Overland Silk Road Economic Belt and the Maritime Silk Road. The two were collectively referred to as One Belt, One Road Initiative, but eventually became the Belt and Road Initiative. Xi's version of the economic belt included creating a vast network of railways, energy pipelines, highways, and streamlined Xi's vision of the economic belt and road initiative included creating a vast network of railways, energy pipelines, highways, and streamlined border crossings both westward through the mountainous former Soviet republics and southward to Pakistan, India, and the rest of Southeast Asia. According to Xi, such a network would expand the international use of Chinese currency, the renminbi, and break the bottleneck of Asian connectivity. The renminbi is the international medium of exchange that China uses. It's like the international yuan versus the domestic yuan. Furthermore, in addition to physical infrastructure, China has funded hundreds of special economic zones, or industrial areas, designed to create jobs and encourage countries to embrace its technological offerings. The 21st Century Maritime Silk Road would accommodate expanding maritime trade traffic. China would invest in port development along Indian Ocean from Southeast Asia all the way to East Africa and parts of Europe. China's overall ambition for the BRI is staggering. To date, 147 countries, accounting for 2/3 of the world's population and 40% of total global GDP, have signed on to projects or indicated at least an interest in doing so. If the bill is passed by the Senate and signed into U.S. law, U.S. policy would oppose the labeling or treatment of China as a developing country in any treaty or agreement the United States is a party to. It would also pause labeling it as either an upper, middle income, or a high income or developed country. It would also pursue labeling it as either an upper middle income, a high income, or a developed country. The bill would also direct the United States to lobby organizations it is part of to do the same, and would direct the Secretary of State to prepare a report within 180 days of its passage that identifies all treaties that have different enforcement standards on a country's development status and those that include China as a party. Though possessing the world's largest economy behind only the United States, China is considered a developing country by the United Nations. Part of the reason that is the case is because the United States still considers it a developing country. But this is where I wanted to talk about this kind of thing here. So the reason China is still being considered a developing country is because while it is an economic superpower due to its vast land size, its natural resources, its manufacturing capacity, much of its population still lives in rural parts of China and has a lack of like electricity, medical, water, like all those things that kind of like show a developed country are still not fully integrated into China. What we have in China are like a dozen or so super cities, and then everything else is basically feeds into those super cities, and that's where a lot of the people still live. Let me look up the exact number. So percentage of Chinese population, rural areas. Yeah, so 37.49% of Chinese population still lives in rural areas, whereas American population, while yeah, a typical rural country contained less than 10% of the population of a typical urban county. So 46 million Americans live in rural America. So 46 divided by roughly 300 and we'll say 60 million is 12%. So literally China's 3 times the amount of Chinese population lives in rural China versus than who lives in rural America. So that just gives you some perspective on this. Now, does that mean that China should be considered a developing nation? Not necessarily. But it does show that China is, even though it's big and it has a lot of economic growth and it can be the manufacturing hub of the entire world, does not mean that its population is sharing in those richness, and it does not have internal problems that could come home to bite in the butt, similar to other developing countries. Percentage of Chinese people without electricity. Let's find that one out, right? Chinese without electricity, China. Access to electricity of China was reported at 100% in 2020, according to World Bank collection of development indicators compiled from officially recognized sources. So that's interesting. I wonder what that is in the US. USA. 60,000 U.S. citizens who lack electricity. So yeah, it's different. So that's one I'm a little bit surprised of. I thought there was less people in China with electricity than there actually are, or more than there actually are, rather. But when it comes to Chinese reporting about its own numbers, everything has to be taken with a grain of salt as well. So there is that. Like I was saying, though, that doesn't mean that China should not be considered a developing country, or it should be considered a developing country. It just means that these are things that we have to take into account when we're talking about these issues. Personally, I think it could probably be considered, due to its largeness and its economic might, probably a middle income country. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a high income country, but yeah, I would say that it's no longer necessarily developing, even though it has those rural issues because of their super cities. So there is that. But that, my friends, concludes that segment of the News Roundup. So let us continue on with some more news. And now we're talking about U.S. House passing an energy bill. So Reuters reported today that the House passed a Republican energy reform bill that would bolster U.S. oil and gas production while scaling back climate initiatives. It was the first major legislation of the House Speaker McCarthy's majority. The Lower Energy Cost Act passed by a majority, mostly... I'm sorry. Fucking nose, dude. I am off my game today. I apologize. So let's rewind that. So the Lower Energy Cost Act passed by a mostly partisan 225 to 204 vote. The bill, a departure from the House majority's almost exclusive focus on culture war topics, would deliver on a top 2022 Republican campaign pledge to lower America's energy cost, or at least that's what they would say. It has little chance of making it through the Democratic-led Senate, where Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has declared it dead on arrival. Quote, "The Senate is not going to waste our time on a bill that sets America back decades on our transition to clean energy," Schumer said in a Senate speech shortly before the House vote. Democratic leaders in both chambers have been calling the bill one that puts polluters over people. The White House has also said President Joe Biden would veto the measure if it were to make it to his desk. Republican leaders secured passage after overcoming reservations from at least 5 party members, which have been enough to block the legislation from passing. Party disagreement over the House bill partly reflected divisions over how to streamline permitting for energy projects, a goal otherwise shared by both Republicans and Democrats. Democrats want a permitting bill that will pave the way for a quicker adoption of clean energy technologies like solar and wind power that have received lucrative new subsidies under the Inflation Reduction Act, while Republicans are pushing for a renewed focus on fossil fuels. Look, we got to get away from fossil fuels, especially gas, at least gas from a transportation standpoint. We can have fuel cell powered semi trucks and fuel cell semi trucks and buses and that sort of thing. Maybe some planes even, but we shouldn't use gas on vehicle travel really mostly anymore. Like we still possibly need it for larger vehicles. Road trips are still a little wonky right now when it comes to electric vehicles. You can do it. Most of the country does have electric charging stations. You just got to plan your route accordingly. But that is going to become better rather as time goes on, especially since the infrastructure bill does invest in battery charging technology and stations for electric vehicles. So that means that when that happens, there's going to be less need for gas. And that means those wells that we're drilling or tapping are going to be less needed as well. That doesn't mean that we're going to not need oil. Literally, almost everything that you own has oil in it, or a byproduct of oil, rather. So don't get it twisted. We're still going to be pumping it out of the ground, but not burning it as much is going to be a benefit, and that means there's going to be less demand overall for it. So that's going to be some give and take there. Continuing on, though. Republicans billed the legislation as a solution to high U.S. gasoline prices that would bolster oil and gas production by reducing regulations, promoting energy development on federal lands, and eliminating climate initiatives imposed by Democrats. I don't know about y'all, but gas prices have come down pretty substantially since their peak. Over here in Texas, Austin, Texas specifically, gas prices hover between around $2.85 or so and $3.10 or so. You can get gas cheaper. You can find it a little more expensive, but that's generally the range they've been at for the last couple of months. So yeah, I don't see a need as far as driving the the cost of gas significantly lower, and any investment into oils now aren't going to affect the prices now. It's in the future. So this is just being like Republicans being Republicans and just wanting to do more oil and gas extraction for some reason. In the future, maybe it will be more expensive to fill up your tank. There's no thing that says it won't be. But even so, doing this would just slow down that increase as there's less gas in the world in general. And so it's not really a wise investment from the federal government. As far as permitting processes are concerned, there might be some room on there for oil and gas extraction, but the United States government itself shouldn't necessarily be in that. And the reason why a lot of these, they want to do it in a lot of federal land is to basically run around state regulations, because if the federal government allows it, then the federal government just check a box and it's good, and they can start doing it. They don't have to worry about fighting it in court too much. Whereas if they do it in state, if they do it on a state level, they're going to go through state appeals for environmental regulations on the state level. Then they might get past that. Then the federal government level might have some things, so on and so on and so forth. So there is that. But yeah, so but that concludes that segment of the newscast. Oh, man. I don't know why I'm out of it today. But we have to continue on. Let's continue on. So there's also the House committee issues a Blinken subpoena. What's that about? Let's talk about it. So in more reporting from Reuters, the Republican chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee signed a subpoena to be delivered to Secretary of State Anthony Blinken for documents related to the August 2021 U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. Chairman Michael McCaul has launched an investigation into the messy withdrawal from Afghanistan under Democratic President Joe Biden and events in the country since. Republicans and some Democrats say there has never been a full accounting for the chaotic operation in which 13 U.S. service members were killed at Kabul's airport. Quote, unfortunately, Secretary Blinken has refused to provide the dissent cable, and his response to the cable forcing me to issue my first subpoena as chairman of this committee, McCaul said in a statement. About 24 U.S. diplomats in Afghanistan sent a confidential cable through a so-called dissent channel, warning Blinken in July of 2021 of the potential fall of Kabul to the Taliban as U.S. troops withdrew from the country, the Wall Street Journal reported in 2021. Blinken said that during a hearing last week that the department had already shared information and was working to provide more, but that some specific details could only be shared with senior officials, a move intended to protect the identity of those who have expressed dissent. Might be true. Asked by Reuters for comment on the subpoena, the State Department referred to remarks by spokesman Vedant Patel at Monday's press briefing. Patel said that it was, quote, Patel said that it was vital to us that we preserve the integrity of the dissent channel. He said that the department was prepared to make the relevant information in the cable available through briefings or some other mechanism. And there's some truth to that. I see that as being truthful here. Dissent channels are designed to allow people to basically not vent frustrations necessarily, but bring up concerns without fear of reprisal. So if you widely share those concerns with the general public, then those reprisals could come down, whether it be unfavorable treatment due to your unfavorable view of a certain action being taken, potentially by your higher ups, or, safety concerns in country due to your working with the local governments. That sort of thing. So I could see that that there is going to be there can be some things here, right? There can be some things here with that. I will say that this is one of those instances that I don't think the Republicans are necessarily just playing games on. I mean, it's all political stuff, right? If this was happening under a Republican president, the chances of Republicans investigating this would be very low. But again, sunshine is the best disinfectant. And so if we want a full transparent government, letting the investigations go through when they're not just partisan bullshit is a good thing. And, we should be good with this sort of thing. It is my opinion that basically Biden looked at Afghanistan as a giant quagmire similar to the Vietnam War, decided it was time to cut losses and get out, while it was still possible to get out without much more in American casualties, especially after Trump set up a deal with the Taliban, especially after Obama tried to set up a deal with the Taliban that ended up blowing up due to the fact that they figured out that Omar had died. The leader of the Taliban had died in either a drone strike or natural causes. There's still some iffiness about that. I think the U.S. claims that it was done in a strike, but it's not entirely known if it was, is my understanding of that. And so if that deal wasn't followed through, chances of more dead American soldiers and diplomats and contract workers would have gone up. And say what you want about the ruthlessness of the Taliban with its own people, they generally seem to have actually followed through on their side of the bargain they made with Trump, helped dissuade attacks, did provide some modicum of security for U.S. forces there against ISIS during the time of withdrawal. They were one of the people that responded to the attack and actually, captured one of the attackers later and, killed them for the attack. So it's a messy situation there. It's very messy. That's not to say that I'm happy with the situation. I'm not happy with the situation. Women in Afghanistan are being turned back into chattel for all intents and purposes. The Taliban is going to be ruthless with the Afghan people and basically turn that state again into a theocratic hellscape. That doesn't mean the United States needed to stay there, if that makes sense. And this is coming from a person that was deployed to Afghanistan in 2015. So that's where I'm at with this. Could it have been handled better? Yes, absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind that the withdrawal could have happened better. Could it have been done in a way? Could have the withdrawal not happened at all, and we could have, stayed there for another 10 years? Also a huge possibility. America's political system isn't really designed for long-term conflict, which is why during World War II, the president was basically elected. FDR was elected 3 times, and now we don't allow that anymore. So there's more give and take with the policies, positions, and things like that. And so it didn't look like the American people, or our politicians were really in it to win it. For lack of a better way to say it, and that's just the reality of the situation. We didn't do the right things to bring a close on Afghanistan in a way that would have, ensured that the Taliban never rose to power again. And so this is where we are. As sad as it is. But with that concludes our segment about this. Now, let's see here. What we got? We got more stuff to cover. Okay. So let's now move on to the Senate. So in the Senate, we have Hawley's Ukraine bill failing. So Missouri Republican Senator Josh Hawley this week advanced a provision that would have established a new Inspector General's office to oversee the aid the U.S. has devoted to Ukraine's fight against Russia. It served to highlight the Republican Party's ongoing split over the U.S. support for Ukraine. According to Business Insider, Hawley proposed a version of his, quote, Special Inspector General for Ukraine's Assistance Act as an amendment to the bill that would repeal the 1991 and 2002 authorization for the use of military force in Iraq, otherwise known as a AUMF. The Senate soundly rejected Hawley's proposed amendment by a margin of 26 to 68 against. Senators John Tester of Montana and John Ossoff of Georgia were the only 2 Democrats to support the measure, along with independent Senator Christian Sinema of Arizona. Many Republicans argued that installing a new Inspector General would have been duplicative, generally expressing a confidence in the current oversight conducted by the Biden administration. Quote, "We already have an extensive operation to oversee spending in Ukraine," said Senator Mitt Romney of Utah. Continuing on, he stated, quote, "We don't need to put another regulator on top of the regulators we already have there." In a statement to Insider, a National Security Council spokesman said that, quote, "We agree that oversight is critical, but pointed to funding that's already been set aside by Congress for existing inspector generals in the State Department, the Department of Defense, and the U.S. Agency for International Development, otherwise known as USAID, USAID. In a Fox News op-ed, Hawley argued that the current system for keeping track of the aid meant there was, quote, "no ultimate accountability for policing waste, fraud, and abuse. Over the last year, our leaders have sent a mind-blowing amount of money to Ukraine," he wrote. "If Congress cares about making sure that cash is well spent, they should go on record about it." Now, it should be stated here that much of the aid, while it's denominated in US dollars, was not actual cash. The vast majority of the aid was in weapon systems, ammunition, and other such in-kind aid. It's just denominated in US dollars. There has been cash given too, don't get me wrong, but the majority of it has not been cash. For their part, other Republicans, though, disagree with Hawley. Quote, I'm going to vote no because I think it's duplicative and will actually be wasteful, said Senator Roger Wicker of Mississippi, the top Republican on the Senate Armed Services Committee. This is essentially a solution in search of a problem, he's later stated. Hawley's bill did win over at least one Republican who's a vocal supporter of aiding Ukraine, Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. Graham stated, quote, I want to convince people we're taking this seriously, said Graham. So yeah, we have all that stuff going on with the Ukraine aid. No, I don't think there's a need for additional oversight of it. Congress has the authority to do oversight of this. The various inspector generals are designed to be pretty mostly independent of their particular offices and actually investigate the internal structures of those offices and what's being done by them. So I don't necessarily think that there's a need for this additional oversight. I wouldn't be against it though. I don't think as long as the appointment of the inspector general or whatever this ended up having would not be purely partisan and would just be like a guy that was in charge of doing the job. Didn't care one way or the other about Ukraine necessarily, wasn't fully anti-Biden or not anti-war or anti-helping Ukraine against Russia or anything like that. As long as it wasn't like someone that's fairly partisan, I don't think it would be a big deal. It would cost more money. The Republicans that said that it would be kind of wasteful since we already have inspector generals that we've given money to and dictated that they investigate these things and have oversight of it would be true. And it would be additional oversight that's not necessary, as it would be duplicative oversight. But it doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad thing. So that's where my opinion is on that. Well, let's also talk more about stuff coming from the Senate and with more oversight and the like. So let's see here. What do we got? Yeah, let's talk about this one. So zombie war authorizations updates. So the Guardian, this is talking about AUMF and the Iraq war. So the Guardian reported yesterday on the U.S. Senate vote to repeal the resolution that gave a green light for the 2003 invasion of Iraq. A repeal returned a basic power to Congress from the White House's 20 years after an authorization many now say was a mistake. Iraqi deaths are estimated in the hundreds of thousands, and nearly 5,000 U.S. troops were killed after George W. Bush's administration falsely claimed Saddam Hussein was stockpiling weapons of mass destruction. Quote, this body rushed into a war, said the Virginia Senator Tim Kaine, a Democrat who has pushed for years to repeal the powers, adding that the Iraq war has had massive consequences. Senators voted 66-30 to repeal the 2002 measure and also the 1991 authorization that sanctioned the U.S.-led Gulf War. The Gulf War was because Saddam Hussein started stealing, appeared to steal, there was some quibbles about that, but basically stealing oil from Kuwait, and then Saddam Hussein claimed that the Kuwait was stealing oil from Iraq and then attack Kuwait to take over its oil fields and bring more into itself, violating international borders. The world came together, invaded Iraq to stop that invasion, and that's where that was. The war lasted all a month, basically. I think it was 6 weeks total before Saddam surrendered and power was given back to him to run his country with various sanctions for various things that he did. We could do an episode about that, but not today. Continuing on, if passed by the House, the repeal would not be expected to affect any current military deployments, which makes it useful, but not as much as people would think. But lawmakers in both parties are increasingly seeking to claw back congressional powers over military strikes and deployments, and some lawmakers who voted for the Iraq war now said that was a mistake. Quote, Americans want to see an end to endless Middle East wars, said Senator Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, adding that the passing of the repeal would, quote, is a necessary step to putting these bitter conflicts squarely behind us. Supporters, including almost 20 Republican senators, say the repeal is crucial to prevent future abuses and to reinforce that Iraq is now a strategic partner. Opponents say that the repeal would project weakness as the U.S. faces conflict in the Middle East. That's not how this works. That's not how this works. Jesus Christ. All terrorist enemies aren't sunsetting their war against us, said Senator Republican leader Mitch McConnell, who's recovering from a fall and missed the vote. When we deploy our service members in harm's way, we need to supply them with all the support and legal authority that we can. McConnell ended, quote. Come on, man. You can do that without the authorized use of military force. The treaties that the United States has entered to with Iraq give the president the authority to support Iraq in conflicts against other people in the defense measure and support the government. I hate it. I hate it. This is so annoying. Continuing on, though. In the House, 49 Republicans joined Democrats in supporting a similar bill 2 years ago. Speaker McCarthy has suggested that he is open to supporting a repeal even though he previously opposed it. But Michael McCall, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, has indicated he would like to replace the resolution. A 2001 authorization for the global war on terror would remain in place under the bill, which Joe Biden said he would support. The 2001 authorization for the global war on terror is where most of the president gets his authority to deploy troops all across the globe to fight terrorism. What gives him the ability to deploy troops to troops to, fight Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab and ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda in the Arab Peninsula and everywhere else in the world. There's terrorists. So that's why I said this doesn't really do much. It doesn't do anything. It's symbolically necessary, but given the fact that the war on terror is still going, and that is where the president is deriving most of his authority to deploy troops, even in places where they're not wanted, like Syria. Kind of funky, right? Now, some senators opposing the repeal, including McConnell, have raised concerns about recent attacks against U.S. troops in Syria. Again, so Syria uses both the global war on terror and the AMUF in Iraq to kind of support it. So maybe that concern is a little valid, but should U.S. troops be in Syria anyways? And they just stay in Iraq under the request of the Iraqi government? Protect Iraq from terrorists? I don't know. It's just me, right? I mean, that makes sense, right? So annoying. So very, very annoying that this is a thing that we have to keep talking about all the time. Cheese. Cheese and crackers. Cheese and crackers. Continuing on, though. So, a drone strike last week killed an American contractor and wounded 5 troops and another contractor. Then a rocket attack wounded another service member. Iranian-backed militias are believed to be responsible. Biden has argued that the repeal would not affect any response to Iran. The Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin, said at a Senate hearing last week that the U.S. troops are authorized to protect themselves, including under Article 2 of the Constitution. The pushback from McConnell comes from amid a growing rift within Republican ranks on the U.S. role in the Middle East, with some echoing Trump to argue against intervention abroad in general. Others are concerned Congress is giving too much leeway to the president. Quote, I think a lot of lessons have been learned over the last 20 years, said Young, the Indiana senator. He said that those supporting the legislation, quote, want to ensure that the American people can hold us accountable, rather than delegating those important authorities to an executive branch, and then lamenting the unwitting wisdom of the executive branch as things don't go well. End quote. So, yeah, I mean, if they really want to take back, if Congress really wants to take back its full authority, should repeal the War Powers Act of 1968, 72. I mean, War Powers Act. When was this? So, the 1973. They should repeal the War Powers Act of 1973, which gave the President of the United States police authority across the globe with certain limitations. Those limitations were, at the time, a little political gray area when it came to the president responding to different crises. But those limitations might be too broad. Those limitations might be too broad. So if they fully want to take back all their powers, they should repeal that. That's just my thought, though. Not that I agree with taking it all back. I think the President of the United States should have the ability to respond to global catastrophes without always having to go to Congress. That doesn't mean the president should be able to go to war without Congress, or do acts of war against other countries without Congress. So there are things like that, like, assassinating a certain person, or deploying troops for 60 days to Libya, right? Or doing other things like that, and then relying on relying on NATO to do its heavy lifting with the use of troops from other countries, and bombs, missiles, and drones. So yeah. But that, my friends, concludes this segment, the newscast. Now, in other news coming out of the Senate, and this is important, and some lefties are going to be a little upset with this, a little upset with Biden on this, that we have Senate Democrats opposing new Biden asylum restrictions. So CBS News reports that a dozen Senate Democrats forcefully denounced a sweeping border restriction President Biden hopes will deter migrants. The legislators issued a formal comment this week that the administration would violate U.S. asylum law if it moves forward with the proposal. The proposed regulation would disqualify non-Mexican migrants from asylum if they cross the southern border unlawfully after failing to seek refuge in other countries en route to the United States. And under current law, they are correct. The first asylum in the United States does not require you to go to the first place of safety. You seek asylum, apply for there, and fail before you can get to the United States. That's not how the current law works. So, and that's not how it works under I think it's the Geneva Asylum International Law, first safe country. I think that's not even how it's done in this. No, I don't want a photo. I hate that, man. Google lets you drag up a section 11. The concept of first country of asylum is defined in Article 26 of the APD. A country can be considered to be the first country of asylum for a particular applicant for asylum if she or he has been recognized in that country as a refugee, and she or he can still avail himself or herself of that protection, or is otherwise enjoys sufficient protection in that country, including benefiting from the principle of non-refoulement, provided that she or he will be remitted to that country. So, yeah, I don't even think this is safe third country agreements. Yeah. So-called first country of asylum principle often justifies the decision to return asylees to another country. It means that a country can reject a person's asylum application if they've already been granted protection by another country. It is also referred to as the safe third country principle. The broader term includes other relationships between an asylum seeker and a third country where they are deemed safe. The United States has limited safe third country agreements, safe third country agreement with Canada. So yeah, this isn't current U.S. law, and it's not international law either. So there isn't any reason to say that this isn't illegal. But continuing on though, administration officials have argued that unless the policy is enacted, migrant arrivals will spike to record levels later this spring when a pandemic-era border restriction known as Title 42 is set to lapse. But the group of Democrat senators called the proposed asylum restriction unlawful and counterproductive. They joined thousands of migrant advocates and organizations, including the United Nations Refugee Agency, in formally asking the administration to immediately withdraw the regulation. Now, this is that ticking time bomb that we told you about with Title 42. A bunch of people came to Mexico to seek asylum in the United States for various different reasons. We sent them back to Mexico. Mexico can't necessarily, harbor all these people, and they're just going to come into the United States once Title 42 goes, and that's just going to spike that number up to millions as they just kind of flood in through the southern border because of pent-up demand due to us more strictly enforcing the border, even with asylees. So this is an actual issue, and it's going to get messy. Now, the Democratic lawmakers say that the proposal is a revised version of a near total ban on asylum that Trump administration enforced briefly in 2020 before it was struck down in federal court. Quote, although we support the administration's goal of managing migration at the U.S.-Mexican border by creating new efficiencies in the asylum system, this rule violates our legal obligations to protect refugees fleeing persecution and usurps congressional authority by adding unlawful bars to asylum eligibility, the senators have said. The scathing rebuke from a dozen Democratic senators and allies of the White House on most policy matters illustrates the tricky political situation Biden has found himself in amid unprecedented migration along the southern border. Migrants have been arriving in greater numbers and from more countries than any time in U.S. history. And there's an election season coming up, so the political realities of that are going to get tricky as well. So after border arrivals spiked in late 2022, Biden announced an overhaul of his administration's strategy to manage migration in early January. To deter illegal crossings, officials increased the number of countries whose citizens could be swiftly turned back to Mexico under Title 42 if they entered the U.S. unlawfully. Border officials have expelled hundreds of thousands of migrants under Title 42 since the public health law was invoked in March of 2020 by the Trump administration. The U.S. could only expel Mexicans and some Central Americans to Mexico before Mexican officials agreed in January to accept Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans. The administration simultaneously expanded opportunities for migrants to enter the country legally, allocating some 30,000 spots per month for migrants with American sponsors to fly to the U.S., and allowing vulnerable migrants in Mexico to secure appointments to enter the country along official border crossings through a phone app. So this is kind of like, hey, we're trying to do this in a manner that is going to allow us to process everybody, but we're still going to deny a lot of people, and that's where this rub comes from. I think that if we allowed people to apply for asylum within their host countries or even legal immigration status in their host countries, it would take pressure off the border. And that's kind of what Biden is doing here. But it's still running afoul of asylum seeking rules. Continuing on, Title 42 is set to terminate on May 11th with the expiration of the COVID-19 public health emergency. The administration is planning to deter migrants from crossing the U.S.-Mexico border unlawfully through the proposed asylum restriction. This would allow officials to more quickly deport those who cannot prove that they are exempt from the rule. Biden's recent strategy has so far led to a sharp drop in the numbers of migrants attempting to enter the U.S. illegally across the Rio Grande and other unofficial crossings. But it has faced significant criticism from progressives and Republicans for opposite reasons. Migrant advocates and some Democrats have argued the new strategy relies on restrictive asylum policies similar to ones enacted by former President Donald Trump. Republican lawmakers, on the other hand, have said the administration lacks the legal authority to accept tens of thousands of migrants each month outside the regular visa system. You just can't, as a liberal, you just can't freaking win here, folks. There's just no winning on this argument. The far ends of the, not saying that they're crazy far ends, but the far ends of the spectrum, those that are strictly super anti-immigration and those that want way more immigration, are both going to be against you if you try to do anything that is honestly somewhat reasonable. This is somewhat reasonable of a trade-off. It's saying basically, hey, we want less people to enter from the border in illegal points of entry and have them come through legal ports of entry, process them, get them into the country should they have legitimate asylum claims. And if they have legitimate asylum claims, they can come in from their host country, especially if they have a sponsor and they already have somebody here, maybe set them up with a job, what have you. And that makes sense. These countries are not safe places, right? That's why that's why people are coming through the border a lot. They're not safe. They don't have economic stability. Some of them are being pursued by cartels. Some of them are fleeing, political instability and political violence in their home countries. Venezuela comes to mind. Nicaragua comes to mind. Guatemala comes to mind. Hell, Mexico comes to mind with the cartels. These are legitimate reasons to pursue asylum. And if you're not going to let them all in, and you have to have some way to filter them through. The fact that Republicans are against that just shows they don't want immigration much at all. And the fact that some Democrats and progressives are against these restrictions show they don't want much restrictions at all. It's an impasse. It really is. And it's a shame too. It's really a shame. Really a shame. Continuing on, pointing to the reduction in illegal border crossings since January's policy changes, the Biden administration has said that the criticism from Republicans is inconsistent with their calls to reduce unlawful migration. True. In response to the progressive criticism, the administration has said its strategy doesn't resemble Trump-era policies. Instead, it requires a new legal migration channel. The proposed asylum restrictions also contain border humanitarian exemptions. The proposed asylum restrictions also contain broader humanitarian exemptions than the Trump administration's attempts to disqualify migrants from U.S. sanctuary. Trump eliminated things like domestic violence, rape threats, etc. And as Nikki says, a lot of these people are dealing with famine, portable water shortages, and other climate change crises as well. True, Nikki. Very true. But that, my friends, concludes that part of our segment on the News Roundup. Let's see. Nikki, you can include the civil rights testers next week. I gotta get going to walk my dog, so we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up with News of the Weird. All right, everybody. So for people that may not know, we like to end our program with a segment we call News of the Weird. And this week's News of the Weird, courtesy of artificial intelligence or augmented intelligence. And what are we talking about? We're talking, of course, about AI art. And this story comes to us from the New York Post. So an artist has reimagined cartoon characters as humans with the help of AI software and a bit of photo retouching. Hidri Lee Dao, a regular contributor to the site Bored Panda, asked AI to render many animated household names in flesh and blood. Dow said he challenged himself to use Photoshop, FaceApp, Gradient, and Rumini to create somewhat realistic images of well-known cartoon characters. He recreated 23 popular animated characters as humans, including personalities from The Simpsons, which we will go over to now. So, as you can see here, we have Marge Simpson. Looks pretty realistic. You can't really tell from this image where the AI is because they went through and re-photoshopped it, touched it up, put in some creases, made it look a little bit more realistic. So there's Marge. Homer Simpson. You know what? If Homer Simpson is going to look real, that's pretty much what he look like. You can see some little blemish right here, right there. There's a little lack of touch up there, but yeah, overall this is not bad. This looks pretty real. A little bit, the eyes look a little fake, but you know, what can you do? Milhouse is an NB? I don't know, it looks a little NB to me. I don't know, it's me. Bart Simpson, Lisa Simpson, and Mo Sizlak, right? That looks like Mo. I think that's the best one. This is like the most clear representation of a Simpsons character, I think. So yeah, that's fun, right? Right? AI art, little augmented intelligence art, little creativity flourishes there. And then we have another thing here that we'd like to talk about. And this one is talking about not your average fishtail. So we'll close with a story that's not so much weird as it is rare from A to Z animals. On a recent trip to Guyana, a country in the north of South America, an American fisherman caught an amazing monster. Ty Klib filmed his magnificent capture and uploaded a video of it to his Tai Ping Patrol YouTube channel. In the gloomy waters of what is referred to as a hidden lagoon, the footage depicts Klib fishing from a tiny boat with a local guide when an Arapima took the bait. Here we're going to see that now. Oh, wait, sorry. Restart that. There we go. Look at this monster. Look how big that is. Holy crap. Like a giant bass with like red scales. That's cool. Look at that. Holy crap. There's not sound. Oh wait, there might be sound. There's sound. Dang. Look at that. Holy shit.
That is a male. Look at all that red. It's out there.
Okay. Okay.
Wow.
Take a good breath.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. So an Arapima is one of the most unpleasant and challenging fishes to capture. According to the Smithsonian's National Zoo and Biology Institute, the fish are among the biggest freshwater species in the world and may grow up to 440 pounds in weight and taper out to a length of roughly 10 feet. They live all across South America's Amazon River basin. In addition to eating other fish, they also consume fruit, nuts, insects, fowl, and other small animals that are present at the water surface. They can breathe air, and it has been reported that they can go without water for up to 24 hours. And then, like, let's bring that back up on screen. Could you picture this thing just flopping out of the water and flopping somewhere? How scared would you be? I'd be pretty scared. I don't know. I'd be like, oh my God, it's evolving. But everybody, with that, I am sad to say we're out of time. We know you liked what you heard because you stick with us to the end, so please smash that like button for the algorithms. It really does help us out. If you want to contact us for any reason, whether it be to get on our shows, talk to us, debate us, give us information you'd like to hear on the News Roundup, there's ways to do that. First, you can join our Discord server, where we like to post memes and talk and chill. And it's a pretty small server, but we're trying to grow it. So you can go ahead and join us there. You can still get a hold of us at Twitter, at CrowdSourcePoll. I don't use it as much as I once did, but we still use it from time to time, so you can find me there, and a DM is always welcome. You can also find us at, I can figure out how to put this up there, Mastodon, at CSP Cypher, at Federated Press, at least for now. That's the Mastodon site we have, among other things. You can also, we'd like to give special thanks to our Facebook community. You can also find us on Facebook at the Tribune Commons or Crowdsource Tribune for Facebook pages. But our group helps us get some of these stories we interact with. We ran a debate community for years. We're still doing that. So that's how we get some of these stories. And we also like to give a special shout out to our producer, Nikki Adams. Without her, this show would just not be possible. She helps us a lot. She does the copy. We talk back and forth about what to cover, how to cover it, and stuff like that. So thank you, Nikki. We appreciate it. And as we say at Crowdsource Politics, keep your head up through the political storm.